Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, the place where high-performing men are empowered to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness while enhancing their career success. You see, in a world full of noise, burnout, and mediocrity, we believe what's missing is courageous and compassionate leadership in the home, because when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. You see, this isn't just a podcast. It's a movement for men who refuse to settle for less in their families, in their focus, and their future. We are curse breakers and we are legacy makers. I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I'm honored that you've chosen to invest your most valuable asset, which is your time, with me today. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast. Today, brother, this is going to be a great conversation because it's not one that I don't think we've had this conversation on the show yet in our couple of years of running. So I'm excited to introduce our guest to you today. His name is Duane Osterlind, and he is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex addiction therapist and supervisor. He is the co-host of the Addicted Mind podcast and the creator of Shame to Resilience, which is a platform and a workshop program dedicated to helping individuals and couples heal from the impact of betrayal, compulsive sexual behavior, and toxic shame. With over 15 years of clinical experience, Duane specializes in the intersection of shame, affect regulation, and relational trauma, helping people move from isolation and secrecy toward empathy, integrity, and genuine connection. He's also the host of the Shame to Resilience podcast and YouTube channel, and you can learn all about that at his website, shametoresilience.com. So listen, Duane, I'm pumped to have you on the show today, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it's going to be a great conversation. And I found, just for you listening, I found Duane through, I think it was just a PR rep, but I was on his podcast, The Addicted Mind, and
that was
and
great.
A powerful conversation. And so we decided to do a swap. And once I learned more about his vision, I'm like, dude, you have to talk to my audience. And so looking forward to having this conversation today. And one thing I'd love to do is just off the get-go here, explain to us how you kind of got into this marriage therapist, being a family therapist, specifically around this sex addiction therapy kind of thing. Tell me a little bit about that.
You got it. That's a great question. Actually, we were talking earlier that we both are in Canada, and when I was 17 years old, I actually ended up in rehab at 17, and that was really foundational for me. Right, I was a young kid struggling with alcohol abuse, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and that really formed my whole journey going forward, because I really needed to get a lot of support and a lot of help, and really had to dig in early into that mental health work. Now, I didn't become a therapist till later in life, right? In my 30s, I actually worked in LA in the film industry. I worked in the camera department, and but this was always kind of my calling, I guess, on a deep level. I did that for a while and enjoyed it. I did that for like 10 years, and it was really exciting and fun, and until actually I ended up breaking my leg on a set, and I couldn't work, right? Because I couldn't walk. But I'm not one to like not do anything. So I said, it was the middle of summer. I was on disability, so there was a summer class on psychology, and as I was in my 30s, I said, I'll just take it. And I went and met with the dean at the school, and he's like, you know what? It starts this weekend. It's a weekend class. It's 6 weeks long. I had 6 weeks of disability, and I said, all right, I'll just do it. And slowly from there, I'm like, this is so fascinating to me, right? And I had this early history of mental health work and all that stuff, and it just kind of all came together. And as I worked to be a therapist, I worked in, at the time when I was getting all my hours, I was working in it was a place where we helped people in lieu of prison time, drug abuse treatment, and I worked there. And I'm one that people feel really comfortable with me. They feel a lot of empathy and a lot of connection. And when people start to do this work and they start to work on their sobriety and everything, this issue of sexuality and compulsive sexuality started to come into the picture. So they would get sober from drugs and they go, but Dan, I got to tell you about this other problem I have. I don't want to tell anybody, but God, I can't stop looking at porn, or I'm compulsively engaging with prostitutes and it's ruining my life and I can't get away from it. And so with that, I started to look into that and started to train under my license as a certified sex addiction therapist. And I've been working in the field for, God, like you said, going over like 15 years working in this. And the other part of that piece, as I worked in this field, was really dealing with the partner who's impacted by deceptive sexuality. And here are these individuals who have betrayed their relationship and they want to repair, but we also have to look at that betrayal trauma that comes from deceptive sexuality. So that's a long story to get to where I am now, but that's kind of a quick story of it, and a lot of misadventures along the way. But that's where I am now.
Well, I love it, man. Thank you for sharing it. And I think it's good just to explain a little bit of your background. I mean, it humanizes
Yeah.
you, especially in this niche as well. And as you were talking, I thought I should say this to you listening to this episode. It would serve you best to just let's lay down any kind of pride or ego or anything, and understand that that everything we're going to talk about today is just a part of what a lot of men struggle with, and
Yeah,
there's no
absolutely.
shame. And I, Dwayne, like, I work with a lot of guys who are on the recovering end of that too. Like, for example, there was an emotional affair or something
Hmm.
going on, and the wife picks up on it, and their marriage takes a strong downward spiral. So I'm particularly interested in this because it's also something that it's something that very common that I see when it comes to high achieving, successful men. So let's
Yeah.
start here, man. Let's set the ground floor. I mean, you use that term deceptive sexuality. Can you explain what exactly that means, and also why is it so common with these high performing, high achieving, successful men?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, the term deceptive sexuality comes from the work of Dr. Omar Minwala, and he coined this term. And basically, in the beginning of this field, when we were all working in this, a while ago, we were looking at the compulsive sexuality piece. Just that here's a person who's struggling with sexual behavior that they can no longer control, despite consequences, despite efforts to stop. This is their primary way of coping. And so they end up struggling with this behavior. But as we did that, we started to see the impact it had on the people around this person, right? Their partners, right? So, but the key component of that was this deception, this hidden part. So, where there was this sexuality that is compulsive, that is not in the open and is hidden. And that deception in and of itself causes a ton of harm in an intimate relationship, right? So when we look at deceptive sexuality, we're looking at that piece, because in order to have that, you have to lie about it. You have to minimize it. You have to hide it so that your partner doesn't know. And that's that deceptive piece. And what happens with that is that causes its own trauma in the relationship with the partner, because a partner's going along and maybe they've been married for 20 years, 30 years, and then all of a sudden they find out that their partner has been acting out with prostitutes or has been compulsively using porn, and they had no idea this was happening, right? And that in and of itself causes a rupture in them, right? Where they don't even know what reality is anymore because of that deception. They thought they had this kind of relationship, only to find out that there was this other piece that was hidden from them. It's the piece of information that changes that whole dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at that, we have to look at that. We have to look at that deception because that's really a key part of it, especially if you're going to work to heal a relationship. There's another part here that we can talk about as well, which is the you said why do a lot of men end up in this space, especially especially men who may be very very successful and very driven, right? There's an idea of like sexual entitlement. And this is part of when we look at male socialization, right? As men, kind of living in this idea of the man box, right? That we're supposed to have a secret sexual life, right? That's normal for men to do. And also, I'm entitled to have that as a man, right? And so oftentimes that sexual entitlement comes into the play as well. That also justifies the deception and justifies that.
Mm. Yeah, I think, yeah, yeah, it's a pattern that I see as well. So just so we understand clearly, what are some examples of, you know, something that you would call deceptive sexuality in a marriage today? Like what exactly, like if we're going to talk practically, what are some of these things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, when you look at a healthy relationship, right, there's transparency, right? You're transparent with your partner. Everybody knows what's going on, right? Everybody knows what the reality is, right? When you look at deceptive sexuality, there's a piece that's hidden from the partner. And if the partner knew that piece of information, it would change the dynamic. It changes everything. So, with that kind of idea, that could be a person who, the idea in their relationship is that they have a monogamous relationship, right? And there's an agreement that they're not going to sexually act out with anybody else, right? And so if they're having an affair, there's infidelity, they're acting out with a prostitute, right? Or a sex worker, and they're not telling their partner, that's that deception. That's that deceptive piece. And oftentimes, men will justify that in different ways, right? Well, my partner isn't sexual enough, or I work so hard, I deserve this,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm successful, I should be able to have this,
Mm-hmm.
right? But once again, that comes back to that deception that this other person in the relationship doesn't know the context and can't make a decision about that context, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, they can't even offer their consent to the relationship because there's this hidden part. Now that can be in all different pieces, right? For some people, if there is an agreement that in our relationship we don't look at porn, right? And I'm looking at porn over here and not telling you about it, that's once again that betrayal, right? There's a piece of information that changes the whole context of the relationship. And that in of itself can cause a lot of trauma for a person, for a
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, it's actually more about the deception than it is the sexuality because it's this broken trust,
Yes.
it's a shame, all those different things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to bring up because it's not about what the behavior is. It's about this deceptive piece that you don't know what's going on, and I have something hidden from you, or I'm deceiving you about. Right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
key. I mean, if you're in a relationship and everybody agrees, hey, if you want to go do X, Y, and Z, and I know about it, and we're all on the same page, that's not deception.
Mm-hmm.
That is not necessarily an issue for the relationship if everybody's informed. It's this piece where the betrayal happens is that a person thinks that this is what their relationship is, only to find out that it's not, which destabilizes their whole sense of where they are in their life, right? So betrayed partners, when that moment of discovery happens, they're often have PTSD symptoms, because they thought their life was this way, and then all of a sudden it's not. And so with that comes a whole host of betrayal trauma and all of the difficulties that come with that, which is all the post-traumatic stress and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many questions I want to ask, but I know we have a time limit.
Right.
But you actually kind of led into this next question I had about betrayal trauma, and sort of answered some of it. But let's zone in on the partner for a moment, the person who finds out, who is on the receiving end. When that deception truly comes to light, and the guy admits to it, he's caught, whatever that looks like. What happens to the partner? And you talked a little bit about PTSD, but what does that actually look like in a woman when she responds that way? Hey, brother, if you are listening to this show, you've most likely built a successful career. You handle pressure, you lead teams, and you get results. But when was the last time you really connected with your wife beyond the calendar, the kids, and the to-do list? Well, if that sounds like you, I have a free gift for you today called the Connection Code, which are 50 questions to break the silence, spark the fun, and bring the fire back. These questions are going to help you learn what she truly desires from you, to break out of the routine and to rediscover fun, and to spark deeper passion and connection without forcing awkward conversations. Listen, most men assume their wives feel loved, but the best husbands ask great questions and keep the connection alive. So if your date nights feel more like board meetings, and if you've gone from soulmates to roommates, and I want you to download this connection code for free and start the kind of conversations that bring you closer tonight. You can grab your copy at dadnationcode.com/code or hit the link in the show notes below. All right, let's get back into it. Talked a little bit about PTSD, but what does that actually look like in a woman when she responds that way?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Often, what happens is the partner has this moment of discovery, right? Maybe it's accidental, right? They often they pick up their partner's phone because their phone ran out of battery, and so they pick up their partner's phone and they get on it, and all of a sudden they stumble into a text thread and they see all this information. And at first, there's kind of this shock, right? Like, wait a minute, what am I looking at? What is this, right? And then in that moment, often partners describe it as kind of like a shattering, right? That their life, basically how they knew their life, is now broken into pieces, right? And they describe it as like a broken mirror, right? I don't know where all the pieces fit. And so with that, right, when the brain doesn't understand its reality, right? Because I thought our relationship was this. I thought my world looked like this. Now I found out it's not that. And I don't know where I stand in my world anymore. So there's an existential crisis that starts to happen, right? Because they can't sort out their reality. Now, everything, all of their memories become questionable. And this is what we see in the biology of this when we look at partners. This damages this kind of information, this kind of deception damages different parts of their brain. First, it puts them in the amygdala is fired off, right? And they're in a fight or flight response. The next part of the brain that is impacted is the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where we store our memory. And all of us, right? All of us have kind of a story of our life. So we know where we fit in it, right? So we can predict our life. And when our brain can predict our life, right, we feel safe. Now you enter this new information, right, that changes everything. It shatters that. It's like all of our memories in this filing cabinet in the hippocampus are dumped out onto the ground, and now they don't make sense anymore. So often partners they'll go and you have the family pictures on the wall, and now they'll look at those pictures and they'll go, but wait, we went to Hawaii. Were you acting out with prostitutes when we were in Hawaii? Right? Were you having an affair then? What about this over here? What about that over there? I don't know how to make sense of it. And so then the brain goes into this hypervigilant state trying to sort this information. And they start asking question after question after question because the brain is trying to get back to this story,
Mm.
right? And once again, none of us will feel safe if we don't know what our story is, right? If we don't know, if we don't have kind of a predictability, the brain says, you're in danger.
Yeah.
You're under threat. I can't protect you. I don't know what's going on. Right. So then this goes into fight or flight, and this whole reorganization, this hippocampal review, they have to keep going over and over again, and they're compelled to do it. And often the person who's done the betrayal, right? They don't know what to do with that because they've answered this question 100 times. I told you I was over here, or I did this, or I did that. I told you that already. And they'll ask the same question. And it's the brain trying to get to safety, and it can't. And then on top of that, with all of that, with this overwhelmed nervous system, now they're dealing with mood disorders, right? And you have a system that's so overwhelmed that they'll move into rage, and then they'll move into numbness, and they won't be able to function. The prefrontal cortex goes offline, so they can't work. They may flow into rages and then back down, and they're like, who am I? It really, there's many dimensions of betrayal trauma. I mean, we won't get into all of them here, but that's an overview of it. But we can break those down into more nuanced things as well. But they'll have flashbacks, they'll have nightmares because their brain doesn't know how to make sense of this new piece of information. And what's important to realize is that betrayal trauma often got dismissed, right?
Mm.
It often got like, look, I've told you the truth, and they would just look at the partner as overreacting,
Mm.
right? You're overreacting to this. You need to calm down. You need to get it together. I've already told you that question. When are you going to get over it? And not realizing the significance of trauma that is caused by betrayal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And deceptive sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
and how significant that is to a partner. And now you get to the man who kind of has some sense of this and they want to repair their relationship. And now, how do you show up for that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do you show up for a partner that's now in PTSD that you caused because of your deception, of your deceptive sexuality and the choices that you've made? Right? And that creates a whole another issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I think you just you've done a beautiful job at explaining, what that looks like. And even as you're talking, I'm picturing conversations I've had with other men who are, recovering and rebuilding,
Hmm.
and hearing some of their conversations and confusion about why their wife, can't move on or can't accept this, or, so it's, yeah, I mean, I can absolutely validate everything you're saying. Um, Now, I want to come back. Don't let me forget. I want to talk about how we can safeguard ourselves um, against something like this as well as men, because I think it's important to, like, at least I'm a huge believer in like boundaries,
Yeah.
and no one's perfect, and so we all have needs and desires, and that maybe are communicated or not communicated. But I want to come back to that. But before we do. I don't want to stop this float because you had sort of segued into another area that I wanted to chat about, was because, okay, let's roll this down the court a little bit more. So there is a man who has caused this, right? Um, and now he's in a situation where his wife is responding exactly like what you're talking about. He's overwhelmed. He just wants to fix things. He just wants to move on. Like he's already dealing with so much shame, all those different things. What does it look like practically for this man to show up and repair his marriage?
Such a great question, right? Because oftentimes what you're describing is the man is they feel exasperated, like I don't know what else to do. I am stuck here. The first thing they have to really start to do is understand the betrayal trauma from this neurological lens, right? To be able to really understand what's happening in their partner so that they can show up in a way for their nervous system, right? For their partner's nervous system to help calm that nervous system. So as I was saying earlier, that hippocampal review, they can integrate that over time, right? It takes time to do that. So first they have to be able to understand that piece. Now, the hard part here is that, as you said, something like, I just want to fix it, right? I just want to fix it. I just want to fix it. That's not going to work with a betrayed partner. There's a couple things that you have to do. You have to have a willingness to be transparent, a willingness to be honest, a willingness to live in that integrity, right? And that's foundational first, right? You have to step out of that behavior. If you're continuing with the deception, none of this is going to matter anyway, right? So I'm assuming, as I'm talking to a man, that they're committed to that process, right? They're committed to show up to their relationship with integrity and honesty and transparency, right? But what happens is that often when their partner is in this distressed state, right, and they're trying to show up, they have to be there for their partner with empathy, right? To really understand the pain of their partner. That's where healing takes place, right? It's when we can validate the other person's pain and the harm that we caused, and we can take ownership and accountability, right? And we can have that empathy. Now, the problem is that you're asking a man who has done this to show up in this way of empathy, right? But then they're the one who also did the harm. So often what happens is they end up in shame, right? And they fall somewhere on what this comes from Donald Nathanson's work, the shame compass, right? So when you have shame, you have a certain reaction, right? And basically, he pointed it like a compass. There's like 4 points on it, right? The man either just withdraws from the situation and shuts down, right? Because they feel, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to shut down, right? Or they just avoid it. Let's just not talk about it, right? So they fall down into avoidance. I'm just not going to bring it up. We're just not going to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. Or they flip the tables and they blame them. Well, it's really your fault that I was in deceptive sexuality because you weren't sexual enough, or you're overreacting, you're over responding. So they attack other, right? And then the last one on that compass is they attack self. Well, I'm such a horrible human being anyway, right? You should just divorce me because I'm rotten to the core, right? So they show up on one of those parts of the shame compass. Well, that means it's about them and it's not about their partner. And they can't show up with empathy, and they can't show up with true remorse, right? That's where a partner heals, when you can show up in that way, own it, take accountability, and be present for their pain and make the space for them to heal this trauma. But if you're mired in your own shame, right, you can't do it. You can't have shame and empathy at the same time. Shame shuts down all of our other emotions. Empathy takes the ability to be emotional, to feel. And if you can't do that, you're stuck. And this is where relationships stall. And they may do this for 2 or 3 years, right? Until they can do that work and they can show up and their partner can say to them, you know what? I understand you get it. I understand you get how you hurt me, and I see your willingness to change, right? I see your willingness to change. And then relationships start to heal. And you were talking about earlier that question you wanted to get back to, which is, how do we protect ourselves, from this? Oftentimes in these relationships, before the betrayal, there wasn't real transparency, right? There wasn't a real conversations about these issues, right? People didn't talk about it. The relationship didn't talk about it. What's interesting, as relationships heal from this, right? And they do heal. I mean, this would be horrible work if I did this and no one got better, right? I mean, it would be awful, right? Because it's so painful. Relationships do heal. They often have such a deeper relationship because you've got to go deep to do this kind of work. And those things are talked about. And that's what makes the relationship strong. And then for the man, what's amazing for men is oftentimes in their life, they haven't had deep, meaningful relationships, especially with other men, right? We were talking about that when you were on my podcast, right? Like as men, We're taught not to have these deep relationships,
Yeah.
and oftentimes in recovery, this is the first time they've had these deep, meaningful relationships with other men, and so they get that as well, and then they also have that with their partner, and there's a real transformation if they can work on that deep shame piece and really understand that component.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty old school, Dwayne. I mean, I'm only 39, but
Mhm.
I've always been an old soul. We don't talk about divorce. We don't joke about it. And my wife has access to every piece of my life. We share
Yeah,
all of our finances. We share. She knows every password to every site, all my passcodes. Like and since day one, I'm like, hey, you want it, you got it. Like, I don't.
yeah,
I'm gonna give you everything because I feel like personally, um, I'm not. I've seen so many men make this mistake, and long before I even got into this space, just friends, right? And I've seen so many men fall into this trap that I'm not convinced that I am somehow above that. You know what I mean? My eyes are not blind to that, and so for me,
yeah,
I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to assume, and this is the way I protect myself is like, I'm going to assume that I am like one decision away from making that mistake as well.
yeah,
And so I'm going to give my wife access to everything. She's going to know everything. And I even, dude, like even things like I'm not alone with a woman in the car. Like if I'm at an appointment and even if she's a friend and she wants to ride, I'm sorry, we'll grab you an Uber or something just because of the optics, whatever. Like
yeah.
I just don't do it. I don't hang out with girls. I don't have a lot like girlfriends.
Mhm.
And so my wife came from, had some experience of what you're talking about, PTSD with her old partner. So there is a little bit of a sensitivity around that. But you know what? In our 10 years of marriage, we have never once had a fight about, you know, relationships online or past relationships or cell phones or like anything like that. And dude, because I get heat for that all the time on social media when I'm like, hey, give your wife your passwords.
Right.
And
Well,
I get unfollows, like hundreds of unfollows. But I'm like, there's nothing more freeing than that.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language. And what's interesting, what you're saying, there's another person that I follow and I love his work. His name's Stan Tacken. And he's the he's the founder of PACT, which is about the neurobiology of couples, right? And how they work together. And one of his things is about secure relationships. And secure relationships have complete transparency,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what you're talking about is a secure, functioning relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's transparent. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody can feel safe in that. And then that also keeps us safe, right? From our darker selves, right? Our want to call it our lizard brain, right? That may say, oh, that's really enticing over there. And if we don't have those things set up for ourselves, maybe we might make that decision and totally regret it. And we want to be able to have that transparency with our partner because I think that's like you said, it just makes it a better place
My
and
goodness.
easier to
Yeah.
function,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think, and selfishly too, like I tell this guys all the time, tell this to guys all the time. I'm like, I, I don't have the capacity to like be stressed about trying to hide things from my wife. Like I don't need that kind of stress and that kind of pressure. I got enough going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why?
I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. I'm a father. I'm a blah blah blah. Like, so I'm like, dude, if you want you have no idea how freeing, and it's like 1,000,000 pounds have been lifted off your shoulders, and you don't have
Hmm.
to carry that weight. Living an integral, authentic, honest life, it's like there's nothing better. You know what I
There's
mean?
nothing better. I mean, God, it makes things so much easier.
Hey, brother, let me ask you something. And I want you to really think about this. Are you winning at work, but quietly kind of losing ground at home? Maybe you're the guy people rely on. You stay calm in meetings. You carry that pressure all day. And you kind of wear that like a badge of honor. But maybe when you walk through the front door at home, your wife feels distant. Conversations feel shorter. And instead of being excited to come home, maybe work feels easier. Nothing is broken, but something is slowly drifting. And if you're telling yourself right now, I'm going to fix this when things slow down, or I'm going to fix this when things get easier, if you're honest with yourself, you already know they won't slow down. They won't get easier. Well, the high performance husband is for men who are done coasting. It's for men who want to win at home like they win at work. You see, this isn't therapy. It's not about fixing your wife. It's not for men who want quick hacks. It's for men who want to be calm under pressure, strong in their body, clear in their thinking, and to become the man that your wife and kids look up to with pride. So if you're listening to this and you know that what got you here won't get you where you want to go, I want you to go to dadnationco.com/accelerator or click the link in the show notes below, and then you can apply to join this accelerator and join myself and many other like-minded men who are leveling up in their home, in their health, and their happiness. They're winning all year long. It's a 12-month mentorship. It's going to change your life. All right, now let's jump back into the episode.
The problem is, kind of going back to that shame piece, people haven't gotten there yet, right? Haven't gotten to that space. Often, it's that shame that keeps them stuck, right? Like if anybody really knew me for, who I am or, my insides or whatever, they're not going to love me, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to really care about me. So I can't really share myself fully with another human being because if they really knew me, I'm not really lovable. And that's that toxic shame, right? That shame that's tied with the identity. And often when we see deceptive sexuality, that shame is a big driver of that too, right? I don't know, if sex has become a primary way of a person coping with distress, right? And it's their primary need, but they can't talk to their partner about this. They can't share it. They can't talk about it because of the shame. I'm so shameful. If they knew this about me, they're going to leave me, right? So they hide it, and then that also keeps that deceptive sexuality going as well.
Yeah.
They get stuck in that, right? And then that's often the undercurrent, the underpinning of this is that shame and trauma that comes with that.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so coming back to this question about preventing it and all that stuff, and maybe I'll because I do have a question about accountability. You said a few things. You're talking about how the importance of accountability and holding space for your wife and all those different things. And I have some thoughts about this, but I'd love to hear what you think. When it comes to accountability, right? So say for example, if I had a porn addiction, and I came out and I told my wife about it, and I was like, I'm going to get serious about this. Should my wife be my accountability partner, or should it be other people? Tell me a little bit about, in your professional experience, what does the best kind of accountability look like for a man who's on that recovery journey? And is it your wife or not?
That's a really good question, and I'm probably going to give an answer that is not going to be satisfying for everybody, but because it does depend. Every relationship is unique in and of itself. But usually, my recommendation is that if a man is saying like, you know what, I'm done with this. I want to live a better life. I don't want this in my life. My hope is that they're going to get support from other people, and that those other people in their life could fill that role for them, right? Now, that doesn't mean, so that's one level of accountability going forward, right? Having someone be able to see that and hold you that, not necessarily for the partner, because the partner, if they've been betrayed, they're already in the hypervigilant state. And so they're already checking, they're already looking at it. And sometimes partners realize like, I need to step back from that because it's painful for me. The thing is that they've got to know their partner is really taking it seriously and doing the work. So the person who is, trying to repair, they have to demonstrate their willingness to do the work. So the partner can let go and say, okay, I'm safe. I'm safer as I earn that trust back, right? Over time. And then I want to add another part of when I say accountability, because when we're looking at repair, right, after the damage, after the hurt, there's accountability towards that. That means making an investment to understand the harm caused, right? To really understand how my choices, my behavior harmed this other person in my life, right? Own that and really understand that, and then work to make amends and repair and fix it, right? To the best of their ability, right? That's a different kind of that's a different level of accountability, right? And for the person to have that accountability, they own the harm caused, that allows them to also do that deeper work to really understand why, why did I do this? How was I capable of deceiving my partner and hurting my partner in this way? What was it about me that allowed me to minimize this or dismiss it or compartmentalize it or whatever I did and hurt the person I love the most?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that's the case. Right? So many men come in, they love their partner, they really care about their partner, and they look at themselves like, "Wow, how did I do this?" Right? And so part of that accountability is understanding that and showing up in that way and making that repair. So that's another level of accountability, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's fantastic. Okay, two more questions for you before we wrap it up. I could ask you so many more, but I'm just trying to think of the listeners and what they might want to get out of this conversation. So, okay, now there's a guy listening to this episode who might feel like, oh man, I've not messed up yet. I've not made that mistake yet, but I sure am tempted. I feel like I'm right on the line. There's this colleague at work, it's just, or there's this, relationship with someone over Facebook or whatever, this tempting porn thing. And they're just like, I don't want to, but I feel that pull.
Mhm.
What advice would you give them? Like, what are the first, couple steps that they need to take so that they don't fall into that trap of deceptive sexuality?
Well, I think the very first piece is not putting themselves in any kind of compromising situation that would allow that to take place, right? That's the first thing, right? Because if you're feeling that, obviously there's something going on with you that you really need to understand and explore and go, what's happening for me here? You know, usually when you're looking at this, you're looking at you can ask yourself the question like, I'm being called over to this area, right? What is the deeper meaning of this for me, right? There is you could say the hedonic pleasure of it, right? Just the pleasure of it. But oftentimes that longing means that something else might be missing in your life. And you need to ask yourself, what's going on? Right. And maybe you need to jump into therapy to do that, to really explore it and see what these thoughts mean. And then eventually, working with your partner to fix your relationship if something is not working in there. Like
Mhm.
if you're not getting certain needs met in your relationship, talking to your relationship about it. And oftentimes this is where shame comes in again. Like, I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to, say anything. And then they go and act out in this way, and then end up hurting the very people they love. But having conversations about the relationship, maybe this isn't working in your relationship, but you really want to understand what's this? What am I trying to seek over here in this area?
Yeah.
Like, what is the deeper meaning? Oftentimes when we look at um, men and women who are sexually acting out, it's not always about the sex act itself.
Mhm.
It's the deeper symbolic meaning of what that sex act is, right? What even the sexual fantasy is, right? When we look at our sexual fantasies, they say a lot about who we are,
Mhm.
right? And our deeper needs and wants and desires in life, right? They will play out in our sexual fantasies. So we have to ask ourselves those questions and understand like what's going on for me. And I think that's where, having someone in your corner who's compassionate and understanding that you can talk to and explore that with so you can understand it on a deeper level. I think you have to do that kind of work, especially if you want to have a deeper relationship in your life, in all areas of your life, really.
Yeah. So good. And I love that you said that. Like, it's not always about the sexual act. There's
Mm.
often a need buried underneath it, an
Yeah,
uncommunicated need or desire.
sometimes I would just add this, like men, it can be, someone who's really highly successful, right? Even sometimes when we're hyper driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that can be driven by trauma. And maybe we don't know how to, in an intimate relationship, express our insecurity, but in this superficial fantasy relationship, we can get esteemed, right? Because it's safe. And it's safe I'm using quotes here, safe because I don't have to risk any vulnerability in it, but I can still get the feeling of affirmation, maybe, or kudos, or that I'm a man, or whatever it is, right? Whatever
Yeah.
you feel like you're lacking.
Yeah.
So you don't have the vulnerability to ask your partner and to talk about that component of your life because you feel too shameful about it, right? So you got to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. One more question for you. I was thinking about this. So podcasting is crazy. You know this as a podcaster,
Yeah, I
that
do.
there will be hundreds of men listening to this, over the next, within the day that is released. Then over the course of, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2030, there are going to be thousands and thousands of men listening to our conversation right
Yeah.
now. So if you could have the mic and speak individually to each one of those 1,000 men, and all these guys are listening to you and they're like, Duane, yes, that's me. I've gotten caught in that. I don't know what to do next. If you could give them one piece of encouragement or one nugget of advice or wisdom, whatever you want to call it, what would you say to that man right now?
You don't have to do this alone.
Mm.
Find men who are walking this path and reach out to them, right? Like, you don't have to do this alone. You're not alone in this, right? Reach out and you will find your way. You'll find your way through it. You don't have to do it alone, right? And I think, unfortunately, as men, we get trapped in that. We're supposed to man up and handle it all by ourselves.
Yeah.
That's not going to
Totally.
work in this stuff,
Yeah.
right? You
That's
need
good.
support.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the longer you keep it in the dark, the darkness will maintain its power over you, right? That thing will maintain power as long as you keep it in the
Yep.
dark. How do you disable it? How do you disarm it? How do you remove its power? Bring it into the light,
Bring it into the
And
light. That's
yeah,
right.
so good.
Bring it into the light. Yeah, you bring it into the light, and you realize you're just not alone. And as men, so many men are struggling with these issues, and they all go internal and feel they've got to handle it all by themselves. And it's like so many men out there, like your podcast, right? I mean, it, right? Men are listening and they're hungry for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it's so important, this work.
Love it. So listen, Duane, this has been a powerful conversation, and man, I just want to say, I want to publicly, acknowledge you from just being on your show and our conversations and this conversation today. You just have such a beautiful heart, and it's clear to see that you're passionate about this. I know you've helped thousands of couples, and it's just, dude, huge props, huge kudos to you. For the work that you're doing. I think it's incredible. So please keep doing that. And with that being said, I want to point anyone that's listening to this conversation who may feel compelled to contact you, to connect with you. How can they find you? How can they get in touch with you? And where's the best place to start?
I think the best place, if you are a person that is trying to repair your relationship and you're owning that betrayal and you really want to get better and do it, go to shame2resilience.com, check it out there, and you can reach me there, and we'll find a path.
Love it. Well, listen, Duane, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to put the link, Shame to Resilience, in the show notes, and I'll grab a bunch of everything else I can find on you and put that in there as well. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Duane. It's just been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Dad Nation podcast today. Listen, if today's conversation challenged you, if it encouraged you or helped you level up in any area of your life, would you do me a favor? Take 60 seconds to rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. This helps us reach more men who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Dad Nation YouTube channel, where you're going to find full episodes, clips, and exclusive content designed to help you win at home just like you do at work. All right, remember, your family does not need perfection. They need your presence. Your leadership matters. So keep showing up, keep leveling up, and never forget, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. We'll see you next time.